Hey guys, welcome to episode 10 of the Urban Cred podcast. Today we'll be speaking with Christopher Mascis. Is that right?
Mascis, soft
Mascis.
C.
Okay. And we are interviewing him today. He is the owner of Lift Marketing, and he is a new friend of mine. We recently spoke over email about how great Magazine B is, and he is now the supplier for that for our company. So, Christopher, why don't you give us a little introduction and welcome to the show?
Thanks, Edward. I'm honored to be on the show. You've done a great job plumbing the depths of all your other guests' journeys through entrepreneurship to help them find their passion projects in life that also pay their bills. It's been an interesting lesson, and I'm
Thank you.
thrilled to be part of it. The long story is that I've been very fortunate to be in the technology business for almost all of my professional life, and it's been a nice time to be in the technology business. I eased off of that a few years ago when I sold a marketing company and was kind of looking for something to do when I discovered this very issue of this thing called Magazine B at the Kinokuniya store in Seattle. I was familiar with Muji, read it, loved it because it had a perspective on a company and a brand that I'd never read anywhere else. And so I started buying more. I bought this one next, Sutaya. Never heard of it, but I liked the cover. Read that, and then I started buying more and more and more of them. And eventually I kind of sensed a thread or a common perspective on these about the way companies could be run. And I thought more people should see them. And as I tried to get more of them, I realized how poor their distribution was in the United States. Very few people carried them. They were very expensive to buy. That probably prevented a lot of people from buying them. So I decided that I wanted to give them a hand and get this incredible, unique magazine into the hands of more people for whom it might change their perspective on the brands they buy from, or more employees of companies, brand and marketing folks, C-level of executives who can actually execute change more in the direction of the B philosophy. So I went over to Seoul, met with the B Media folks, and after a few months of talking, I wound up being their distributor for the United States. So I'm bringing it over by boat instead of flying it over, which dramatically lowers the price. It's allowed us to sign up more wholesale, more retailers to sell the magazine, and lowering the price has increased the volume. More people are discovering it, which is kind of what I wanted all along. And in the process, I've been able to meet entrepreneurs, business owners like Edward, who we have fascinating conversations about why they've been attracted to be and how that's reflected in their own business and in their own life.
Yeah, absolutely. We for Urban Cred, we recently had a period of time where we weren't stocking Magazine B just because there was a limitation in terms of importing it into the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that Christopher has done this helped open up the opportunity to stock more issues. If you like Magazine B and you picked up some recently, you have Christopher here to thank for that. And of course, just a little plug for us is that for the month of May, we are doing a pre-order for Magazine B, and there's a little special there. You get a free gift, and then you can just go on our website and take a quick peek. But not enough of that stuff. We're gonna go back on to Christopher now, and you know, Christopher, it seems like you made that journey seem so compressed and so simple, but was it really that simple? Just to kind of say, hey, Magazine B guys, we really want to work with you. Can you kind of work with us? Was it just boom, that was it? Or was it like some difficulty, or was there some like walls had to be hopped, maybe like language barriers that had to be crossed?
I think it was much less the language barriers than the cultural barriers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Big surprise. People that are native to other countries have a different perspective on business and how
Whoa.
they want to do business. I know,
Right.
shocking. Uh, when we went over there in July 2019 and had some conversations with them, uh, they were interested in it, and they admitted that I made an incredibly compelling case, and the pricing was right. But what I came to learn through a lot of exposure to Korean culture was they were much more interested in what kind of relationship we were going to have than the way I dotted I's and crossed T's on a contract. In fact, to this day, and we're almost 2 years into having a business relationship, we don't have much of a legal contract binding us. We have an NDA, and that's it. And I've imported 6 figures worth of their products and take care of their wholesale needs, and have recently opened a B2C shop selling direct to consumers. All of that basically on a handshake and a once or twice a month Zoom call that we talk about it. So building a relationship was important, and we both made a lot of steps recently that have indicated our mutual trust, which is wonderful. It's been nice not to pay lawyers thousands of dollars for adversarial contracts. I fired 2 lawyers in the case of getting here because both of them wrote contracts that were so aggressive at protecting me and my business that I knew that it would end the relationship if I put those in front of my counterparts in Seoul. They would
Mm-hmm.
have been, as they should have been, insulted by the lack of trust that was implicit in those relationships. And I understand that's why we have legal contracts to uh, cover our butts when things go badly. But
Right.
uh, the relationship would have ended if I put those contracts in front of them. So it's been a gradual inching forward of trust. We've kind of mutually extended, oh, well, you can do this for us, or I'll do this for you. And we've kind of inched forward into a situation where we have a pretty advantageous business relationship, actually, at the moment. They consult us on 1 or 2 little editorial and marketing things that they do. Uh, they've listened to feedback on what they can do on the marketing side to support distributors and retailers like myself. Uh, it's kind of organically and slowly, because I'm a very type A American, grown into a relationship of mutual trust. Of course, I would love to all of this to have happened a year and a half ago, but
Right.
that's not the way it was going to be.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It actually sounds like the old-fashioned way of dating, right? You just have to get to know the person, right, before you jump into the boat with them, right? So it's definitely certainly it's these days the youngins, right, are always what are these dating apps and stuff? But back in the day, we used to, take it slow, go on a few dates. But yeah,
Are
I
you,
think that
Edward, are you really old enough to say back in the day? I'm just,
absolutely.
I'm just
I
curious. Okay.
I'm I have a kid, as you guys know. So I play that card when it comes to whether or not I'm old enough. So
Okay.
when they say, "Oh, Edward, are you old enough?" I have a kid. Come on,
All
that's
right.
plenty old for me. But yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that certain places in the world do business in a certain way, and it's in a previous podcast with Maya. Actually, we spoke about how sometimes when you go to other countries, it's not really about other people adapting to you, but you adapting to their culture and how they do things, and it's it's very important that to know that even though the U.S. is considered like a leader in the world in many things, it doesn't mean that we should be so aggressive or should be so uh, you know in the lead in terms of what we want, right? A lot of it has to do with being humble and being understanding of the other team or other person you're working with. So and I think for us at Urban Cred, we try to do that in terms of our partnerships, whether it is within the U.S. or outside the U.S. We try to listen to what they want, and we try to work with them to create beneficial partnership that kind of benefits both of us. Because in business, what we think is business is just basically working with a partner long term. We want them to be happy so we can be happy. And it's the same thing with relationships too, right? You just want both parties to be happy. So yeah, I definitely agree with how you approached it. So going into the magazine itself, what what specifically about the magazine really hooked you? Was it like the visual, or was it like the information you learned, the interviews, or what was it so great that you liked about it?
It's a different philosophy
Mm-hmm.
of how to build a company and how to measure success of what the company is doing. Uh, so often in uh, branding in most Western companies at least, looks like what I call makeup and costumes. We've got this product, we've identified this potential customer cohort out there, and the branding exercise is what does this product need to look like in order to get the people that we've identified to buy it to open their wallets to do it. And often, the way they dress up a product kind of has nothing to do or very little to do with the organic process of developing the product. Why did people decide to even make this product? What decisions are we going to make as we develop it? Who are we going to work with as we develop? They just want to dress it up so that they can prop it in the corner somewhere and sell it to people. What I was reading in Magazine B was something very different from that, kind of product first branding. Most of these companies had come up with a real, genuine, sincere desire to solve a problem or give their customers a new capability to live their life. And they developed the product not forgetting about business or the need to make a profit, but they seemed to trust that that would happen if they developed the right product. So Magazine B goes into some level of detail about how the teams at these companies develop the product. What decisions do they make about what to include or what not to include? Materials, design, functionality. It all seems very geared to what the customer actually needs to have in their life. And then the marketing, the branding, is just a reflection of that, to me, somewhat more pure distillation of what a product could do. Let me read something to you from the publisher's note in Muji, which again was the first issue of Magazine B that I wrote. An extremely well developed brand concept and pitch perfect presentation are important, but it's much more important and much more difficult to motivate people to make such ideas a reality, all the while maintaining consistency across the world. No company or organization can last without people who understand its core ideas and put them into action. Brands do not come to life without a deep attachment and a steadfast interest. Nice sounding words might win for a moment, win over great crowds, but when a company's actions contradict its words, the consumer finds out. The real value of the Muji brand is its people who faithfully embody the alignment of words with action. Really, I think Magazine B is a story of a culture, a product focused culture of people who are genuinely interested in creating a change in the world, delivering their customers a product that's going to make a material difference in their life, not just in terms of convenience, but in terms of their sense of well being, their ability to express their own desires and their own sense of self. Sounds a little woogie woogie, I understand, but for a guy who spent 30 years in business that was ridiculously focused on profit and loss and week to week changes in numbers and beating the competition, it's certainly a radically refreshing point of view on how a company can focus its resources and what it considers success in a great product.
Yeah, totally. And I think that the 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 so yeah, Magazine B is something of a different kind of publication for me as well. I think that it's 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 everything you said, and you put it in a very good way. But to add on to that, it's also something where it's an experience where I could kind of look into uh, the minds of other people, and we've talked about this earlier, right? It's just because you enjoy a brand because you like what it offers, or you it doesn't matter what it is. You like the story, you like the products, you like the quality, whatever it is. But sometimes you're alone in liking that, right? And to be able to read these articles, these interviews of people who are also fans or who are also take inspiration from these other brands and to apply them to their own is something that is always interesting to me. Um, for me, I've always valued the importance of story, and Magazine B does a very good job in creating and kind of showcasing the existing story that the brand has already created, and it goes deep into it. So, you know, the the story weaves it, whether it is from imagery, if it's from text, interviews, behind the scenes, uh, and all these kind of weave together to create like a very educational but also very interesting story where I can kind of immerse myself, and it's not, and it's sort of like a classic, and a classic in a way where I could, just like if I read a Disney story to my daughter or watched a like Pulp Fiction with my wife, um, these are stories that I can always come back to and learn from because they'll always be relevant, uh, regardless of what age or what time you read them. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I think branding is all about storytelling. And I have this simple formula about why we buy things and why we're attracted to things. We're trying to form two different identities when we connect with the product. We're trying to change the story that we tell ourselves about ourselves. I'm the kind of person who buys this, and this is what that says about me. This car, this piece of clothing, this piece of kitchen equipment. I'm I'm this kind of a driver. I'm this kind of a cook. I'm this kind of person with sartorial presence based on this piece of clothing. We're telling ourselves a story, but we're also buying things that tell the world a story about who they are, who we are. And they are, of course, pretty close. One of the things a brand does is it creates a shortcut to that story. When I go into Armani to buy a piece of clothing, I know if I choose to buy something, yeah, I'll enjoy the way it feels and the cut of the fabric and the way it fits. I'll feel good physically wearing it. But what got me to pay a pretty ridiculous amount of money for something I buy from a high fashion place like Armani or Chanel is the sense of self I get from having bought something from Armani or from Chanel. And all of these brands, no matter what kind of product, are doing that. That's what companies do to market things. That's what the purpose of brands is. What's different about the brands that Magazine B talks about and the way they tell that story is, from my reading, there's an authenticity and genuineness to the way these companies approach telling their story. That there's 100% overlap between the story they're telling their customers in order to interest them in their products and the actual product of the story or the products that they're selling. There's a great line for this, and it's just one sentence in the introduction to the Sutaya book. Most of these brands have established themselves by developing a way of life they wanted to introduce to the world rather than to utilize marketing techniques. Uh, just as with Apple, in some ways, these products are so distinctive and so pure in the connection between the intent of the people creating them and the need that they're fulfilling in their customers' lives that really you don't need to market. You don't need to puff up the advantages. You don't need to make explicit connections between what the product's doing and what the customer may or may not actually need. People see the product and go, oh, I understand how that overlaps with my needs in whatever product area this product exists. So these are reflections of companies that are have chosen to invest the resources and the time in being truly in tune with the experience that their customers are going to have with the product. And they use that as their branding, and they use that to inform their sales and marketing. That, for me, after my career, was refreshing.
Yes, and I think it's true. Breaking it down, it's very just basically be authentic. Be authentic to yourself and to your customers and what you're selling. There are a lot of companies out there who sell fluff when it comes to their products, what they offer. But I think that now that you mention it, a lot of the brands that Magazine B focuses on are very authentic, like you said. They're very true to themselves, and and what they offer their customers is also very real and they're very honest to them. Whether it is Patagonia, Snow Peak, whether it is even something like Star Wars, or like Lego. So they all create great products, and you know what you're buying into when you purchase their products. So I do agree, and I think that actually I think that in the Porter book there is something similar. The owner of the Porter company in Japan, I can't quite find it, but he says something similar where you know he was asked if price was a concern when it comes to Japanese workmanship, when it comes to bags and things like that, and he mentioned that you know value is in the in the eye of the consumer. If they find value, they'll know that the price they're paying for it is equal to the value they'll get in return. So, and it doesn't necessarily mean just the quality of the product, but like what the brand can do for you. So like I like to think of it as the brand is kind of like a stepping stone to becoming the ideal person that you want to be in the future. Whether it's an educational course, whether it is a product, whether it is a, whatever it could be, it is a stepping stone for you to get there. And I think that it's totally true in many of the brands that we see today. So, that is that is a lot of good things about Magazine B. Is there, like it is a great magazine, but you've had your share of reading them. Is there something that you think that they could improve upon in terms of how they produce these or interview or create content?
Uh, I think one thing that I would love to see them do, and since it's their 10th anniversary coming up, I would love to see them publish a retrospective magazine. Because any given month,
Hmm.
people walking by a book stand see an issue of Sutaya. What the heck is Sutaya? And they don't buy it, and they miss the opportunity to learn something about a really interesting retailer of books and music who thinks about his business as a
Hmm.
cultural oasis that feeds that part of his customers' souls, not just a bookseller. They'd miss that. So many of the brands that they cover are companies that I'd never, and most people have probably never heard of before. So I think there's probably millions of potential customer interactions every day. People seeing Magazine B, not being particularly interested in the cover of the current issue and going, not so much, I'll move on. I think an issue that summarized 10 years of B, looked at the various brands, drew a couple of conclusions out of them, and basically formed as a sampler would allow a lot more people to pick up a copy of that because, oh, I'm getting a lot. I'm getting a wide exposure to a wide variety of brands. And it doesn't matter if I'm not interested in one or two of them, the confluence of all the brands will make up for that. number one, I think it would sell, but more importantly, I think a high percentage of the people that buy it would like what they read about Magazine B and then go on to become customers of the back issues.
I
As
think
a
that's actually,
business,
I think that's a great
one
point.
of the great things about B is that they have now, I think, 86 back issues
Hmm.
that they've published since 2011. And they're all kind of timeless. None of them are topical. Most of the things they talk about these brands are still completely relevant and mostly accurate 10 years later. And certainly the lessons about a brand and a company are timeless. So once we bring in a customer and introduce them to their first or second or third issue of Magazine B,
Hmm.
I think there's a fairly high likelihood that a certain percentage of those folks are going to continue, like me, uh, buying more and more issues. So just strictly as a business opportunity, I think the fact that they keep all of these in print and there's a certain number of customers out there who'll be likely to buy more and more of them because just as I did, just as you did, they like the story that Magazine B tells about what businesses can truly be for their customers and their employees and their partners.
Mm. Right. Yeah. That's actually a really good idea. I if it was like every 10 issues or every year they did like a you know like a collection of past issues, that would be even better. I think like if they did something like that, it would be great for if you were to give as a gift. Someone who didn't know anything about Magazine B, you toss him this, he gets like kind of like a breakdown of all the issues, like a little bit of each. Um, and then they kind of get a feel for, oh, this is what it's like. It's like a sampler,
Right.
It's
Right.
great.
Exactly.
Yeah. Um,
Exactly. So that editorially, that's the one thing that I would have them do. I have tried to figure out the method to
mhm.
how they pick brands. I early on my time with B, I created a big spreadsheet and collected all this information. What industry are they in? What sub
Right.
industry? What country?
Yeah, like a
Um,
yeah, like a
what
whiteboard, and you're kind of like
Yeah,
pins.
absolutely. Because I was trying to figure out the method in their madness. How do they go from covering a company like Google to a company like Staub,
Right.
which is a French maker of cooking pots, or Hay, which is a Danish design company of housing accoutrements. The range of companies they've covered is just astonishing. A couple months ago, they published one about a one location French ceramic house called Estier de Villette. Never heard of it before. Really never given that much thought to $400 coffee cups that are artisanally made by, I think, generally Nepalese Buddhists in Paris. Of course, everybody knows about that, don't they? So figuring out their methodology for selecting brands is kind of a hobby I have a little bit, and I admit I will never crack the code. So
Yeah, I can see. You're hiding it, right? The pins, the drawings, and how you connected the dots, even though you have not connected the dots. But yeah, yeah, I think that actually, moving on from adding on to that, actually, I don't know if they would be the right people to do it, but it would be nice to actually see like a magazine B issue of the B media team, kind of just to see how they run their business, but also how other people, kind of like other readers or other people who are fans of it, react, and how they kind of see or see how like see the magazine and how it's helped them. Um, and like I mentioned this earlier, it's like for me among my friends and family, I'm like the only one who reads this magazine, unfortunately. I'm trying to kind of get other people like to kind of get into it, but um, it would be cool to see what other people think, how it's helped them along the way, and things like that. So it would be maybe if they, I'm not sure if that's a very humble thing to do, but maybe one day they can do it on themselves. It would be kind of cool to see.
I think there's a pretty low likelihood of that. I
Yeah.
think they like the relative anonymity
Right.
that they have. But one thing that would be interesting, and I think that readers of it would really benefit from is some sort of an online community. I mean, there's a little bit of it in Instagram. There's a hashtag for Magazine B, and you
Mm-hmm.
can see other people who are fans and what they do with their copies. But I'd be interested in getting in more robust conversations with people in the auto industry and what do they think of the three issues of Magazine B about cars, Mini, Porsche, and Audi. What insights did Magazine B have that were useful in transforming their businesses or other auto businesses? That would be an interesting conversation. Uh, I think that as human beings in
Yeah.
industrialized countries in what are we in the 21st, 22nd century? Uh, we swim, we live in a world of brands
Mm-hmm.
that is so omnipresent that we probably aren't even conscious of it most of the time. The car we pick out to drive. I finally bought my first really nice car a year ago, so I'm kind of very present about, oh, what does it mean about me that I bought this car? Should I feel
Mm-hmm.
good about that? It's strange. But when we go shopping for clothing, we're constantly being subliminally, I would
Mm.
say, uh, given way new ways to think about ourselves. If I'm interested in, or if I buy this product, that brings along these assumptions or these characteristics about my personality that I can now adopt as my own. And as I said earlier, that's a way I can think about myself. When I look in the mirror, I can think, oh, I'm the kind of person who wears this, drives this, eats this, cooks like this. Those become elements of my personality and identity. And those are also what I express to other people. Of course, I'm not, running around and saying, oh, I wear this kind of clothing and I drive this kind of car.
Right.
But the accumulation of all the characteristics and identities that we take on as we purchase things forms how we think about ourselves and how we present ourselves to other people. So that is an aspect of the way we as modern consumers in this time in human history really live with all of these influences. Why not learn something more about what's behind both individual brands as profiled by B, and after you've read a couple, you kind of get a sense of, oh, this is how this is done. This is
Mm.
how a brand thinks about the identity that's encapsulated by its product and communicates it. This is how a brand expresses the lifestyle that you're going to be able to live when you have this product. I mean, that whether we want to choose to be conscious of it or not, I kind of advocate that that is the way we live. That when I go to Whole Foods, I am this kind of shopper. It says
Mm-hmm.
this is what I care about regarding food. I don't mind, overpaying for something that's organic and, from a goat herder in the Spanish Alps, or that, and
Right.
that says something about me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, because of globalization, we've really never had the wealth of things to enjoy as consumers from all around the world. We can adopt cultural identities just by buying a product that's from somewhere else. I go buy a really wonderful French cheese, and suddenly I take on some characteristics in a subtle, maybe even unconscious way of being the type of French person who enjoys this particular type of cheese.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an enormous part of why we make purchasing decisions, how they reflect on our identity. So why not learn about companies who are doing that, but they're doing that from the perspective of let's create a product that's actually useful, that's not going to tell people they are something that they're not. And we can all think of brands that kind of, in a way, encourage us to believe a lie about ourselves in order for us to buy them. I mean, I can buy all the Armani I want. I am never going to be George Clooney or Richard Gere. It's not going to
But
happen.
I can see it. I can see it. I can see little George Clooney in you.
Here's $20. Thank you very much, Edward. That's very thoughtful.
That's the end of the podcast, guys. I got my $20. But I'm gonna record that and I'll just play that to people when I kind of wanted to sell them the magazine. But yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that you said it best. It's definitely, again, it's just getting to know a person, getting to know the brands that are selling you, and these brands that they advertise. I mean, they go in depth into. These guys aren't just after your money. They're after more than that. And just to read these magazines is like, what it is. It's like reading the dating profile. You're getting some more details about the person you're dating, and long-term relationships. You get to know the person more. Now for these 86 issues, is there a favorite? Which is your favorite issue?
Oh, the two that I brought with us. Oddly, the first one
Okay.
I read, Muji,
Okay.
and really Sutaya.
Uh-huh.
Um, Sutaya is about a company in Japan, although they have stores in a variety of other Asian countries. It's just an old-fashioned books and a little bit of music seller, and they sell some cultural accoutrements around writing and reading as well. Uh, but the gentleman's passion in the book around the place of culture and literature and music in individual human beings' lives, that it's an important part of feeding your soul and creating your identity deep down. And he did not see what we now in the United States anyway call a third place in Japan, where people, instead of being in a transactional environment, could kind of come in and commune with these things. Many of us know about the pleasure of just being in a bookstore, the pleasure of having books around you. That gives a deep comfort to a lot of people. And he built this business not so he could sell a ton of books. I think he built this business largely to give people a place to come and immerse themselves in these soul enriching artifacts called books and music.
Mm.
And he talks, the founder of Sutaya is incredibly articulate in that. It's like we have cash registers and we think about expanding the business because doing that allows me to create more of these spaces where more people can come in and have a refreshing couple of hours communing with things that are really going to deepen their soul and their experience of life. Uh, and Muji does much the same thing, but with a much more pedestrian product set. It's not literature and deepening your soul.
Mm-hmm.
It's making all these thousands of moments a day that we have living in our homes and needing tools and devices to do things for us. It's making those more pleasant in a high value way because their products really aren't that expensive. They're not bargain basement, but they're exceptionally well designed for what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And the thought and the care that they put into, designing a fountain pen or a T-shirt or accoutrements for the bedroom is really remarkable. So neither of these brands are products that are fancy, that took a great deal of R&D, although Muji spends a pretty significant amount of time on design. But they're simple things. But they're indicators that even in simple things, the reason that you do these, the end goal that you're trying to create with your customers matters. It's if you read history, our lives are busy. They're running a business, having a family. All of those are hard. But really, just in the last 120 years, life has gotten so much easier. I mean, 120 years ago, we didn't have antibiotics and indoor plumbing and indoor heating and bathing, and the food supply was generally unsafe and insecure. People died when they went to work because places were unsafe.
Right.
Transportation was ridiculous. The point is, people spent so much time just surviving until relatively recently in the scope of human history.
Mm-hmm.
And the last 60 or 70 years have brought such an incredible amount of wealth and ease to our lives, right? We've got indoor plumbing and drugs and a secure food supply. I can walk 3 blocks down the street and buy the craziest things imaginable.
Right.
Uh, I, I I think about being out of the exotic things that I want, not being out of exotic food anymore. The point is that we have thousands, millions of years in our brainstem of operating as human beings based on just survival, and the incredible wealth that's been generated and is increasingly better distributed in the world means we suddenly have a lot more time to think about a lot of other things that don't have anything to do with survival, like
Mm.
how we feel about ourselves and our shirts and our clothing and our cars and what identities we project. These are all luxuries that for 99% of people didn't exist just 100 years ago. But now there's so much wealth, so much of so many people's time is almost spent in leisure, although we think that running the kids to soccer games and piano lessons isn't leisure. Um, we're lucky to be able to afford the time to attend to those things. So that's why these brands, I think, take on added importance. Is we're spending so much more of our lives um, being exposed to products like this and thinking about products like this to form our identity. 120 years ago, our identity was just to be the guy that survived the week,
Mm-hmm.
the month, and the year, and brought his family along with him. Things were tough. Things have never been as easy as they are, and we have the luxury of paying attention to brands like this. We can go vastly overpay for Patagonia workout wear
Mm-hmm.
that is probably qualitatively better, but let's be serious. We buy Patagonia because it allows us to participate in their story about how Patagonia is in the world, right? That it's making an environmental difference in the world by putting on that jumper. And so many of the VCs in Silicon Valley wear these damn things. Or that hoodie that's got the Patagonia label. You're advertising a brand that, oh, I'm square with Patagonia and their
Right.
values. It's brands allow you to buy values and lifestyles as a badge, as a decoration that you can put on your life.
We were also briefly talking about what in the world is Nizin's B's strategy to pick brands. Is there a specific brand you'd like to see them interview at some point in the future?
Oh, what a great question. Uh, so I just hired a distributing company
Mm-hmm.
to warehouse and mail my things out. And I was talking with the guy who runs the company, and he had an interesting insight. He said there really aren't any blue collar brands
Mm.
that have been covered by Magazine B. I mean, IKEA, there's some low price brands that make commodity products like IKEA and Bic. Certainly, everybody uses Google and Netflix. But I think he's right. I think it's an observation that's correct. There's a whole class of brands out there that Magazine B has kind of ignored. It would be interesting to see how well their format and perspective of doing a brand documentary stretches outside of their comfort zone of generally products that are higher end and not commodity. I don't know if it would work because I think that a lot of what they cover are non-commodity products. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, when you're running a factory and just wheeling off commodity products, and your number one goal is to have the cheapest thing out there with the best distribution, not to be creating a product that attends to the soul of why somebody's going to use your Bic pen or your Mont Blanc pen. Uh, I don't know that there's that interesting a brand story
Mm-hmm.
about the way these folks do it. Uh, what suggestion do you have about a quote
No, I mean, I would
blue
just
collar or more pedestrian company they could
no,
do?
I
Walmart.
definitely. I mean, I think that it would just really be talking about the people, right? It's just the people who work, the people who who buy, right? The people, how it improves the lives of the customers, or even the employees, or maybe just talking about the stories behind employees, and how they made a contribution to the company, or or how they affected other companies that they worked with. Just things like that. Maybe it might be kind of interesting to kind of look into, um, and that aspect could be interesting. I would say. I mean, I think that every company, doesn't matter what it is, even if it's a blue collar one, or if it's just like another brand, or small, big, multi national, or like, a small coffee shop. Each company has an interesting should have an interesting story, whether it is
Hmm.
from start to finish, the history, maybe the launch. There's always something that could be interesting to write about or read about. It's just you have to. I think they just have to find, that angle. Whatever that angle is. Um, I mean, I'm sure, like, if you interviewed some person off the street, and that's kind of what I'm doing. It's just they have something to say. They have something interesting to kind of talk about. And every person, every business has a story. So I think as long as you can kind of spin that into something, you know, written well and documented well, and reads it well, I think it's worth looking into.
I, rather than specific companies, I think of industries I'd be curious to have covered. Something that virtually everybody in the world does on a daily basis is buy food.
Right.
I read a super interesting book about a couple of grocery chains in Ohio that were family run, and
Mm-hmm.
just what the mechanics of running a grocery store and then a
Right.
grocery chain is like, what unique challenges those businesses have, how they've evolved. I found it fascinating.
Right. Yeah.
Uh,
Exactly.
and we all go into grocery stores all the time, and I'll bet you most people, with the exception of brands like Whole Foods, don't think too much about what grocery store they go into.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you're certainly selling a commodity product on
Mm-hmm.
very low margins, but you'll never have to worry about demand. How does a company that is in that business, commodity, permanent demand, and low margins, and largely an undifferentiated service? I mean, how much different is one grocery store than another? How do those companies think about brands? I'd also be interested in a profile of an educational institution,
Mm-hmm.
because certainly when one chooses to go to a certain type of school, I'm sure the quality of the education one actually gets at an Ivy League school is very high. But you're as much buying the brand association and the identity of being an Ivy League graduate as you are the actual value of the things that you learned there. I think brand is a large part of a lot of the educational choices people are making today. That would be an interesting area of exploration for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. That's I can actually see a line of magazines just focusing on education, or even just like, um, yeah, like it could be anything. I think they have such a opportunity to interview so many different kinds of people, businesses, industry. It can cover such a wide range. Like it could be, just like you said, it could be sectors, industries. It could be mom and pop shops. It can be how a business works, supply chains, right? It could be airlines. It could be it could
Oh yeah,
right
they
airlines,
haven't
like,
done an airline yet,
yeah, like how
right?
how you know right.
They've done some travel and resorts. They've got
Yeah.
Hoshinoya, a Japanese resort chain, and Ace Hotel, and Bali. The city
Yeah.
issue on Bali
Right.
was kind of about that.
Yeah. And I think they are trying to kind of branch out. I mean, as you said, like they're doing city ones, like Bangkok, Seoul, Kyoto. They're also doing like coffee shops. They're doing like tech companies, Google, Airbnb, Instagram. So I think they are trying. And I have no, like, as we talked about earlier, like how they choose the brands that they work with. I don't know if I want to be part of that team. It's so, I for me it would be so hard to pick one to like kind of work on for the month. So kudos to them. But it's, I think for them, it's now that I think about it, it's really interesting, fun to be able to kind of pick from the world's, you know, like oyster, like the world's sea of different kinds of brands and industries and whatever it is, and be able to kind of showcase that story to the readers of Magazine B. So it's interesting, right?
Yeah, I've completely given up trying to figure out what their method or criteria
Right,
are for picking a brand. I mean, as a business person,
right,
I'm sure that they want to do one or two a year that have enough name recognition that it'll sell particularly well.
right.
I'm sure that they have a legitimate story and the magazines are just as good, but I'm sure that's a factor. And when I see an issue like Astier de Valette, and I'm sure they have an editorial budget for going, yeah, and we want to do one or two of brands we just love that
Yeah,
it's not going to sell and nobody's going to know about it, but we think it's important to cover this brand for this reason. So,
yeah,
uh, once again, we've used that word that's on the cover again, balance.
yeah.
They probably found some balance to be
That is
between
true.
doing super popular brands that will sell well and other more niche brands that,
Yeah,
frankly, have been kind of a pleasure to learn about.
right,
Uh,
right. Yeah, I think it's like a nice surprise too, just be able to kind of like, um, I think Magazine B actually offers like a subscription too. So
Correct.
right, you would get it in the mail, but for them, it would
Correct.
be nice to get like a little surprise. But um, for the people who, browsing through Kinokuniya or whatever online, you see a magazine that you flip through pages, and oh, this is kind of interesting. It would be kind of a fun surprise for them as well, I suppose. So
Yeah, we're going to try and start connecting using social media and some other marketing techniques with what I call the brand fans
mhm.
for each one of these brands because of things like the internet and Facebook and Instagram. There's probably a core group of people who will buy anything about that brand because they've just decided to spend their life obsessing about Lululemon or New Balance or I don't know, Vans or
Mm,
whatever, right? Our
right.
consumer society has created these little subgroups of people who will follow a brand. So we're going to start trying to let those people know that these things exist about their favorite brand, and
Mm,
hopefully some folks will pick those up. Um, I, uh, I'm interested to see what they do with the next 10 years. I don't perceive that Magazine B has changed very much. I think what's remarkable is their consistency of
mm,
point of view and practice. In terms of folks who are interested in learning more about Magazine B, one of my favorite pieces of the magazine, and probably the part that I go back to and read more than any other, is the publisher's note that's at the very beginning of all the magazines. It's usually just a couple hundred words. It's kind of a rather high level free association, very good, by the publisher or the editor in chief, with a little bit of why they chose this particular magazines, what personal lessons about identity and brand that they've gotten out of it. And it really sets the tone for what the rest of the magazine is about. Um, I've gone back to the publisher's note on a lot of these time and time again, and we're in the process of putting them on our website so we can have our customers get a better sense of what's in each magazine. Because even more than the table of contents, I think the publisher's note give you a sense of the personality of each one of the magazines.
this
I'd
is
strongly recommend you, maybe Edward, that's something when you're talking to your friends and family about just read this darn magazine. Uh, you can cherry pick some quotes out of some of those and ask, wouldn't you be curious to learn more about that thing that I just read you? That's
right.
pretty interesting.
Maybe I won't throw the book at them after all. Then that might not be a good idea.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. People like a little love when you're asking them to do something, right?
Just true. That's true. I'll do that. Read the book.
There
um,
you go.
like if you had to sell this magazine in 3 sentences, how would you do that?
How to do product first branding so that your leadership, employees, partners, and customers are all aligned with the purpose of your product.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay,
I
that's good.
think I don't think there's anything I would add
That's good.
to that.
Sorry, I threw that kind of like a left field kind of a brain puzzle there, but yeah, that's
No,
good. Yeah,
it's a good exercise, right?
yeah,
Am I able to be on message or not? If I'm put
yeah.
under pressure,
Right.
right? What's the one sentence I'm going to use to explain this? That's pretty close, actually.
Yeah. No, that was pretty good actually. So I think that was good. I'm gonna write that down. um,
Yeah, I'm really so stuck on this idea that brands are the way we form our identities, uh,
that's
in
good
ways
too.
that are mostly unconscious, and
Right.
that as a curious person, it's interesting to see how brands do that. We all know about the mendacious ones, the Marlboro Man, right? You're going to be
Mm,
this macho, independent cowboy out on the plains by sucking and burning plant leaves and killing yourself, right? That's probably the archetypical example of an awful brand identity that
right.
not only is a lie, is actually killing you,
Right.
right?
Right.
That's in our that's on this level of the brand spectrum of being bad, of allowing people to buy and consume a product that gives them an identity that's toxic.
That's
We
toxic.
have no shortage of toxic brands
That is true. Yeah.
out there right now. So I think, and that's forming a lot of our cultural discourse and our political discourse.
Hmm.
We could do another half an hour on what's becoming pretty clear, that the political divide that we're seeing in a lot of Western countries right now isn't about policy and isn't about facts. It's about identity, or you hear the phrase, it's tribal
Hmm.
a lot. So these questions of identity matter. It's more than just, oh, do I want to be a Mercedes driver or an Audi driver or a Lexus driver? It's what kind of identity I feel I need to have shapes my and our group's political opinions that lead to actual policy decisions that affect people's lives. There are people that are living better or worse because of policy decisions made on personal and group identity questions. Uh, Brands are kind of a harmful way of looking at that, but I think it's a way of getting into the conversation of how do we form our identities in the world. And Magazine B talks about it in a commercial context, but
Hmm.
I think some of the things we've got going on in the world are about other kinds of identities that don't have to do with the facts,
Right.
right?
Right.
I want to be this independent person who praises liberty and freedom or whatever the hell that means, so I'm not going
Hmm.
to wear a mask or get a vaccine.
Hmm.
That's not a fact driven conversation. That's an
Right.
identity. I want to be a rebel in the world.
Hmm.
Okay, good luck with that.
Right.
Um, Whatever. So,
Right.
anyway,
Yeah.
you're trying to wrap up.
No, I agree. That's like a whole topic for another. Maybe I'll bring you back for that topic specifically another time. But
Edward and Christopher solved the problems of the world
yeah, as
with
well as taking it over. So it's a double win there,
yes, but that would create a whole new set of problems, I'm sure.
and a whole new set of podcast episodes. But um, yeah, thank you for coming on. It was a pleasure. If more people wanted to find you, whether it's Instagram, email, you know, uh, dating profile, or like website,
Yeah,
where can they find you?
I'm I'm very happily taken, so there's no dating profile. I'm on LinkedIn, Christopher Mascis, Mascis. My company is selling Magazine B at reading-b.com. And Magazine B has a sister publication. Just as B are single issues about one brand, Magazine F is a single issue about one ingredient. They've got 12 issues about things like vinegar and curry and honey and chocolate and kimchi. And we brought that in, and we have a business in selling that. And that's at reading-f.com. my company does not have a website because I already know the business I'm doing and I don't need to attract other people at the moment.
Okay, great. And thank you for coming on. It was a pleasure, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
This is great. I look forward to this being the beginning of a robust friendship. Let's stay in touch. I really,
Yeah, for
really
sure.
appreciate the invitation. It was a fun conversation.